Welcome to Sleepy Time Stories. Hey dear friends, let's continue with the third part of the story. If you haven't listened to the previous parts yet, visit my channel and listen to it first for the complete experience. Now, get comfortable, relax, and enjoy the story. Let your body sink into wherever you are lying, and let the quiet air wrap around you like a soft blanket. Tonight, we are going to wander back to the layers of time, 3,000 and more years, to a place where stone meets gold and a single human hand keeps the world turning. This is a story about a very small room, a very old god, and a man who wakes before the stars have even thought about fading. Let your breathing find its own gentle rhythm, and let the story carry you like a slow boat on a wide river. Hidden deep inside the largest religious building the ancient world would ever know, a place called Karnak Temple. There's a room so small that a modern closet for hanging clothes would feel spacious beside it. The walls of this room are not decorated or painted for anyone to admire. They are simply stone, thick and old and silent, holding back the weight of the temple above. The ceiling presses low, so low that a tall person might feel the need to bow without even meaning to. There are no windows cut into those stone walls, no tiny opening for light to slip through, no gaps in the breeze to carry voices from the outside world. Only one door breaks the smooth surface of stone, and that door is held shut by a heavy pin made of bronze, thick as a man's wrist, meant to keep everything ordinary far away. And inside the hidden chamber, resting inside a wooden cabinet that someone long ago covered with thin sheets of shining gold, sits the single most important object in all of Egypt. It is a statue, but not just any statue. It stands about 2 feet tall, which is shorter than the legs of a small table, and it is made of solid gold that seems to glow even when no light touches it. The statue wears a tiny linen tunic, stitched by careful hands, and a tiny golden crown that catches even the faintest shimmer. This is not a carving that merely points toward God or reminds people of a god. To the people of Egypt, this small golden figure is the god himself, living and breathing in metal and stone, awake and aware inside his little room. The Egyptians do not make the kind of separation that later people would make between a symbol and what it represents. When the priests who serve at Karnak speak the name of the great god Amun-Ra, they are not talking about a distant spirit or a vague power in the sky. They are talking about this small, handheld golden object that lives in this room, that sleeps and wakes, that gets hungry and thirsty, that needs to be cared for just as a child or a king might need care. And every single morning, before the sun even thinks about showing its face above the eastern horizon, that statue must be undressed, bathed in precious oils, anointed again, dressed in fresh clothes, given food to eat, and spoken to in prayer by a man who prepared himself for this moment with hours of cleansing and chanting. If that man fails in any way, if he skips a single day, if he performs the sacred actions in the wrong order, if his hands are not perfectly clean, the priests believe that a great serpent named Apis will defeat the sun god in the underworld that night. They believe that tomorrow, the sun will simply not rise. The great Nile River will refuse to overflow its banks and water the farmlands. The dead will wake from their graves and walk among the living, confused and hungry and restless. This is not a poem. This is not a metaphor that people use to make a spiritual point. To the priests, this is how the world actually works. This is cause and effect, as real as a stone falling to the ground, as real as the heat of a fire. The year is 1250 before the Common Era, in a city called Thebes, which many centuries later will be known as Luxor. And on the third day of 7 in that ancient land, the man who wakes before dawn and walks through the dark temple to that small room is you. This is the third story in a gentle series. On the first day, you carried mud bricks as a farmer, your back bending under the weight of the sun. On the second day, you helped build tombs in a village called Deir el Medina, a place where more people could read and write than almost anywhere else in the ancient world. But today, you have climbed higher on the great ladder of Egyptian society. Today, you are a priest at Karnak, and what you are about to do every single morning of your service is something that almost no other human being on this earth has ever been asked to do, before or since. Using quiet artificial intelligence trained on real archaeological discoveries and old records written on papyrus, we have recreated what 7 days in ancient Egypt might look like and felt like. The golden treasures and the towering pyramids are the picture on the front of the postcard. But the work behind all that brightness, the small, patient, daily work, is what we want to show you tonight. If you happen to miss the first day or the second day, you can find links in description below to listen to them whenever you like. For now, let us step backward through time, 3,275 years, to a moment when the sky is still completely dark and the world is holding its breath before the dawn. The sky above Egypt is black as ink, deep and endless, scattered with stars that burn cold and distant. The stars are still out, and the air is cool against your skin as you wake from sleep. You open your eyes slowly, lying on a low wooden bed in a long building made of sun-dried bricks. This building is the priest's barracks, a simple, single-story structure tucked against the southern wall of the great Karnak complex. It is here that the priests who are currently on duty live during their month of service. Your title is Web Priest, which means the pure one. This is the lowest rank in the Egyptian priesthood. There are higher ranks above you, including Hemnet priests who have special duties, lector priests who read the sacred text aloud, and the high priest of Amun himself, who lives in his own quarters and performs only the most important rituals. But you are not unimportant, not at all. The Web priests are the ones who do the daily, hourly work of caring for the gods. Without you, the rituals would stop, the sun would not rise. You are 42 years old, and you have been serving as a priest on this rotating system for 16 years. Your father was also a priest, and his father before him, going back as far as anyone can remember. The Egyptian priesthood is passed down through families, from father to son, generation after generation. Your own son, who is now 11 years old, is being trained at the temple school just across the courtyard. In 7 more years, he will join you in the rotation, waking before dawn, shaving his body, walking to the dark columns to the small stone room. You are one of about 1,000 priests who serve at Karnak in some capacity. Some as cleaners, some as chanters, some as scribes, some as keepers of the sacred oils. You serve for 1 full month at a time, 3 months out of every year. For the other 9 months, you live as a normal man in your home village, which lies just south of Thebes. You have a wife who sleeps beside you when you are home, 3 children who run to meet you when you return from the temple, a small plot of land where you grow vegetables, and a herd of 17 goats that you have named one by one. You drink beer with your neighbors in the evening. You go to dinner parties where people tell jokes and argue about small things. You complain about the family who lives next door and lets their chickens wander into your garden. But while you are on duty here at the temple, you are something else entirely. You are a container for purity, a bridge between the human world and the divine. You rise from your bed. Your feet find the cool stone floor. You walk out of the barracks and into the great pillared courtyard of Karnak, passing through the hypostyle hall, a forest of 134 stone columns, each one taller than a building of 6 stories. The columns soar above you, and in the dim pre-dawn light, they look like the trunks of ancient trees turned to stone. Each one is painted in colors so vivid that if you could see them as they truly are, your breath would catch in your throat. The colors are red like the sunset, blue like the deepest water, gold like the sun itself, and green like the first shoots of barley after flood. The hieroglyphs carved into stone are filled with copper that gleams faintly in lapis lazuli that holds a blue glow even in the dark. The tops of the columns are carved into the shape of papyrus blossoms opening toward the ceiling, and that ceiling is painted dark blue with golden stars arranged exactly as they appear in the real night sky. When the sun rises, the whole complex glows like a jewel box open to the light. But right now, in this hour before dawn, it is a dim and vast and blue-shadowed cavern, silent except for the soft slap of your sandals against the stone. The sound carries in silence, echoing gently off the ancient walls, a small human sound in a place built for something much larger than any one person. You arrive at the priest's bathing pool. This is a sacred lake, fed by an underground channel that draws water directly from the Nile River. The water is kept ritually pure, never touched by unclean hands, never used for anything except the purification of the priests. 2,000 years from now, archaeologists will dig up this pool, brushing away the dust of centuries, and they will find it still there. The stone steps you walk down right now will be the same stone steps that tourists from all over the world will photograph in the year 2026, though they will not know your name or the sound of your voice. You strip off your linen kilt and set it aside on a clean stone. You wade into the water, feeling the cold rise from your ankles to your knees to your waist. The water is cold, genuinely cold, because the Nile is cold in November, the great yearly flood. The inundation that covers the farmland with rich black silt has recently receded, and the river is settling into its quiet winter rhythm. You take a deep breath and you bathe 3 times, completely submerging your head each time, holding yourself under for a count of heartbeats. You scrub your body with natron salt, a natural substance that bubbles faintly when it touches wet skin. Natron is a mixture of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate, and the Egyptians use it for everything, from soap to toothpaste to the mummification of the dead. It leaves your skin feeling strange and clean, stripped of oil, stripped of smell. You chant prayers under your breath at each immersion, the words old as the temple itself, words that your father taught you and his father taught him. You learned them when you were 8 years old, sitting cross-legged on the floor of the temple school, repeating after the teacher until the sounds felt as natural as breathing. Then you shave everything. Your head, your face, your arms, your legs, your chest, every single patch of hair on your entire body. A priest must be as smooth as a child, as smooth as the day he was born. The Egyptians believed that body hair attracts lice and dirt and sweat, and any kind of impurity in the temple is completely unforgivable. The gods are pure, and the hands that touch the gods must be pure as well. You do this every single day of your service, scraping your skin with a bronze blade, feeling the slight pull and drag of the metal against your flesh. By the end of a month, your scalp is raw and tender, and by the end of many years, your hairline is changed forever, receding into a pattern that marks you as a priest even when you are walking to the market in your regular clothes. You dress in fresh white linen, clean and soft and smelling faintly of the sun. You never wear wool inside the temple, for wool is forbidden, considered too coarse, too close to the animal. The linen is so fine that if you hold it up to the light, you can see through it, the fibers almost translucent. This is real, not a legend or an exaggeration. The Egyptians produced linen of such extraordinary thinness that some pieces have survived into the modern world, and when examined under microscopes, they have a thread count higher than the bed sheets you might buy in a store today. Wearing this linen feels like wearing nothing at all, like wearing air that has been woven into cloth. You take a small alabaster jar of consecrated oil, the jar smooth and cool in your hand. The oil is a blend of myrrh, frankincense, and lotus blossom essence, mixed together in a recipe that the priests of this temple have used since the time of a pharaoh named Amenhotep III, who ruled 2 centuries before you were born. You take a bronze scraper, its edge worn smooth from years of use. You take a basket of fresh bread, baked specifically for the god by women who work in the temple bakery, women who live apart from the regular world during their service, and keep themselves ritually pure through bathing and fasting and prayer. You take a clay pot of beer, the liquid dark and rich and slightly sweet. You take a piece of roasted goose, still warm from the fire, the skin crackled and golden. You take a bouquet of fresh flowers, lotus blossoms opening their pink petals, narcissus nodding their white heads, cornflowers blue as the summer sky, all of them cut just this morning from the temple gardens by gardeners who have also purified themselves before touching the sacred plants. Now you walk toward the inner sanctuary. The path takes you through 3 successive courtyards, each one smaller than the last, each one more sacred than the one before. The first courtyard is large enough to hold a crowd of worshippers, but is empty now, silent and waiting. The second courtyard is smaller, with fewer columns and a floor of white limestone that glows faintly in the dim light. The third courtyard is smaller still, a narrow space surrounded by walls carved with scenes of pharaohs making offerings to the gods. You pass through the great hypostyle hall again, walking between the towering columns. You pass through the festival hall built by a pharaoh named Thutmose III, a hall where celebrations are held on holy days. You walk down a narrow corridor where the walls are inscribed with the names of every pharaoh who has ever donated to this temple, a list that goes back 900 years to the very founding of Karnak in the Middle Kingdom. The names stretch along the walls in neat rows of hieroglyphs, each one a king who has added gold or stone or land to the temple's wealth. You arrive at the inner sanctuary. The doors before you, sealed with a heavy bronze pin. You are completely alone. No one else is allowed here at this hour. No one else has the right to see what you are about to see. The inner sanctuary of Karnak is surprisingly small. The most sacred building and the most sacred temple of the entire Egyptian empire is a stone shrine no bigger than a modern walk-in closet. It measures about 3 meters by 4 meters, which is to say that you could lie down on the floor and your head would almost touch one wall, while your feet would almost touch the other. The ceiling is so low that you can almost reach up and brush it with your fingertips. There are no decorations on the walls here, no paintings, no carvings, no inlays of precious stone. The walls are simply stone, bare and rough, because this room is not meant for human eyes to admire. This room is a house for the god. Inside this small stone room sits the wooden cabinet covered in gold leaf, gleaming faintly even in the darkness. And inside that cabinet is the statue. You slide the bronze pin out of its hasp. The metal scrapes against the stone with a sound that seems very loud in the silence. You push the door open and step inside. You bow your head, not because the ceiling is low, though it is, but because you are in the presence of the god. You pray silently for a moment, feeling the weight of the moment settle over you. Then you unlock the cabinet, using a small key made of bronze that hangs from a cord around your neck. The cabinet door swings open, and there is a statue, sitting on a small shelf lined with linen. You bow again, you pray again, and then you begin. The hymn you sing this morning is real. Fragments of it still survive in the modern world, carved into temple walls and copied out by ancient scribes onto papyrus scrolls that were found buried in sand. It begins with words in the old Egyptian language, sounds that have not been spoken aloud by any living human for thousands of years. Wuben Hetep word, Wuben Hetep. Awake in peace, great one. May you awake in peace. You sing these words softly, your voice barely louder than a whisper, but in this small stone room, the sound fills every corner. You sing the hymn for about 20 minutes, the verses unfolding one after another like the petals of a flower opening to the sun. The hymn is long, very long, with many verses and many repetitions, but you do not have a written copy to read from. You have never had a written copy. You have memorized every single line, every twist and turn of the melody over the many years of your service. The words come to you as naturally as your own name, rising from some deep place in your memory that you did not know you had until you needed it. When the hymn ends, you step closer to the cabinet. You reach in with hands that are perfectly clean, hands that have been washed 3 times and scraped with natron and dried on fresh linen. You undress the statue, lifting off the tiny linen tunic with great care, removing the tiny golden crown and setting aside on a soft cloth. You lift the statue out of the cabinet and hold it in your hands for a moment. It is heavier than you expect, every time. Solid gold has a weight that surprises you, even after 16 years. You set the statue on a small table that stands beside the cabinet, a table that has been used for this purpose for hundreds of years. You take the alabaster jar of consecrated oil, and you pour a small amount onto a piece of linen cloth. You bathe the god with the oil, wiping every surface of the small golden body, the face, the arms, the chest, the legs, the tiny feet. You speak to the god as you work, not in the formal language of the hymn, but in a quieter, more intimate voice. You say things like, "You are good, you are strong, you are the light of the world." You take the bronze scraper, and you gently scrape off yesterday's oil, which is dried to a thin film on the golden surface. The oil comes away in small curls, and you collect them carefully on a piece of linen, to be burned later in a sacred fire. Then you anoint the statue again with fresh oil, a thin layer that will soak into the gold and keep it shining. You dress the god in a fresh linen tunic, pulling the tiny garment over the golden head, straightening the folds so that it hangs properly. You place the fresh golden crown on the god's head, adjusting it until it sits straight. You put fresh tiny sandals on the god's feet, sandals made of gold leaf over a core wood, with straps of linen that you tie carefully around the golden ankles. Then you set out the offerings. The bread goes on a small clay plate to the right of the statue. The beer goes in a tiny cup to the left. The roasted goose goes on a larger plate in front, the meat still steaming slightly in the cool air of the sanctuary. The flowers you arrange in a small vase of blue faience, a gift from a pharaoh who lived long before your grandfather was born. You step back and you speak to the god quietly and specifically. The Egyptian priesthood is not about distant worship or abstract theology. It is about relationship, about conversation, about the daily give and take between a human and a divine being. You ask the God to bless the Pharaoh, who sits on the throne in his palace far to the north. You ask the God to bless the temple and all who serve within it, from the highest priest to the lowest servant. And then, in a small private way that is technically not part of the official ritual, but that every priest does in his heart, you ask the God to bless your son. Your son is 11 years old. His name means beautiful one. He is sitting across the courtyard right now in the temple school, struggling with his hieroglyphs, complaining that his hand hurts. You ask the God to make him strong and wise and kind. You ask the God to keep him safe. You believe that the God hears you. You have believed this every morning for 16 years, and that belief sits in your chest as steady and warm as a banked fire, something that never goes out. When you are finished, you bow to the statue one last time. Then you back out of the sanctuary, because you must never turn your back on the God. You take the broom of fresh palm frond that hangs by the door, and you sweep the floor behind you as you go, erasing your footprints, erasing any trace of your presence. The sanctuary must remain pure. The God's house must remain clean. You lock the cabinet, turning the small bronze key until you hear the click. You lock the inner sanctuary door, sliding the heavy bronze pin back into place. You step away. The whole ritual has taken about 1 hour, from the moment you enter the sanctuary to the moment you close the door behind you. The sun has now been above the horizon for perhaps an hour, though you have not seen it yet, because the inner sanctuary has no windows. But as you walk back through courtyards, you notice the light changing. The great hypostyle hall is now glowing with morning gold. The colors on the columns blazing to life in the sunlight. The blue paint seems deeper. The red seems brighter. The gold leaf on the capitals catches the sun and throws it back in sparks. The temple complex is filling with people. Other priests walk past you, nodding and greeting. Scribes carry rolls of papyrus under their arms. Administrators discuss grain shipments in low voices. Workers sweep the courtyards with brooms of woven reeds. The day has truly begun. The rest of your day is filled with administration. Karnak is not just a temple. It is the largest single landowner in all of Egypt, controlling more wealth and more resources than many kings. It owns hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland stretching along the banks of the Nile from the delta in the north to the cataracts in the south. Modern estimates suggest that the Temple of Amun owns roughly 15% of all the arable land in the entire country. That means that nearly 1 out of every 6 fields of wheat or barley or flax in Egypt belongs to the god. The temple owns ships, large wooden vessels that sail the Nile carrying grain and stone and wood and beer. It owns granaries, huge circular buildings with pointed roofs that rise like small mountains against the sky. It owns slaves, most of them prisoners of war captured during campaigns in Nubia to the south and in the lands of Asia to the east. It runs schools where boys learn to read and write and calculate. It loans grain to farmers who have had a bad harvest, charging no interest because the god is generous. It makes loans of bronze tools and wooden plows and linen cloth. It is, in modern terms, simultaneously the Vatican, the Federal Reserve, and the largest agricultural corporation in the country, all rolled into one vast, slow-moving, many-layered institution. You spend the middle part of the day working as a scribe, because every priest is also a scribe, and every scribe is also a priest. You sit on a low stool at a wooden table, a roll of papyrus spread out before you. You are copying out a temple ledger, a record of grain shipments coming from Lower Egypt, from the farms that line the delta, where the Nile splits into many branches before reaching the sea. The numbers are long and careful, written in a script called hieratic, which is a cursive form of hieroglyphs used for everyday writing on papyrus. Hieroglyphs are beautiful and sacred, but they take too long to carve or paint for daily record keeping. Hieratic is faster, smoother, with characters that flow into one another like handwriting. Your own handwriting is small, neat, and slightly cramped from years of practice. You have been writing since you were 6 years old, when your father first placed a brush in your hand and guided your fingers. You remember the feeling of the brush, the smell of the ink, the way your father's hand covered yours and made the shapes come out right. The papyrus you are writing on is itself a small marvel of craftsmanship. It is made from the inner pith of papyrus plant, a tall reed that grows in the marshy wetlands of the delta. The pith is cut into thin strips, each strip as wide as your finger and as long as your arm. The strips are laid in 2 layers, one running horizontally and the other running vertically. These layers are pressed together under heavy stones, dried in the hot Egyptian sun, and then polished with smooth stone until the surface becomes silky to the touch. A single roll, about 30 centimeters wide and several meters long, costs the equivalent of a worker's daily wage. The temple uses thousands of such rolls every year, storing them in dry rooms where the air is kept free of moisture. The god's business requires a great deal of writing. When the sun reaches its highest point, it is time for lunch. You eat the food that the god did not eat. The Egyptians have a beautiful and gentle understanding of this. They believe that the god, being divine, takes only the spiritual essence of food, something they call the kar. This kar is invisible, weightless, but real. It is a part of the food that nourishes a divine being. The physical bread and beer and meat remain, unchanged in appearance, unchanged in substance, but now touched by holiness. The priests eat what the god has spiritually consumed. Nothing is wasted. Every crumb of bread, every drop of beer, every scrap of meat is eaten by the human servants of the god. The bread you eat for lunch was offered to the most powerful deity in the cosmos only 3 hours ago. You do not find this strange. You find this to be a sacred kind of efficiency, a way of honoring the god even as you fill your own belly. The bread is excellent, much better than the gritty, coarse loaves that ordinary workers eat. Temple bread is sifted multiple times, the flour passing through finer and finer sieves until only the softest particles remain. It is made from finer flour, ground more carefully between the millstones. It is baked in proper clay ovens by skilled bakers who have been doing this work since they were children. Still, there's always some sand in it. There's always some sand in everything in Egypt, because the desert is never far away. The wind blows sand into the ovens, into the dough, into the beer. You have learned to chew slowly, to feel for the grit with your tongue, to swallow carefully. But there's considerably less sand in this bread than in the bread of the common people. Your teeth at 42 years old are mostly intact, thanks in part to this finer diet. You have lost a few molars, but your front teeth are still strong, still white, still able to bite into a piece of roasted goose. In the afternoon, you teach. There's a small school at Karnak, what the Egyptians call per-ankh, which means house of life. These houses of life are found in temples all over Egypt, and they are the places where knowledge is kept and passed down. About 30 boys gather here each day, ranging in age from 6 to 15 years old. They are learning to read and write hieroglyphs, the sacred script that holds together the fabric of Egyptian civilization. These boys will become the next generation of scribes and priests and doctors and administrators and architects. They will build the temples of the future. They will write the letters that keep the country running. They will perform the rituals that hold up the sky. Your son is one of them. He sits near the middle of the room, his wooden writing board balanced on his knees. He looks up as you enter, and you see in his face the same look you used to give your own father when he came to teach. You do not acknowledge him specially. You treat him exactly as you treat the other boys, because that is the way of things. But you feel a warmth in your chest that has nothing to do with the afternoon sun. You teach by having the boys copy out short passages onto wooden boards that have been painted white and can be reused. Each boy has his own board, a flat piece of wood about the size of a book, coated with a layer of white gesso. They write on the white surface with a brush and black ink. When the board is full, they wash it clean with water and start again. The passages they copy are what the Egyptians call wisdom literature, or sate, the teachings of older sages who lived long before your time. Some of these texts are 800 years old, written by men whose names are still remembered. Some of them will still be copied 1,000 years after your death, passed down from father to son, from teacher to student, for generation after generation, until the language itself changes and the old words become hard to understand. One of today's lines comes from an ancient text called the Instructions of Tutip, one of the oldest surviving works of philosophy in any language. It is already over 1,000 years old in your time, written by a wise man who lived during the Old Kingdom, when the Great Pyramids were still new, and yet the words still feel fresh and true, as if they were written yesterday. The line says, "Be a craftsman in speech, so that you may be strong. For the tongue is a sword to a man, and speech is more powerful than fighting." You make a particularly inattentive 10-year-old boy write this line 20 times. His name is Sinam. He is bright but lazy, always looking out the window, always finding reasons to stop writing. His brush drips ink onto his kilt. He sighs heavily every few minutes, hoping you will notice. You correct his posture, straightening his back with gentle hand. You adjust his grip on the brush, moving his fingers slightly. You guide his hand through a particularly difficult hieroglyph, one that has many small strokes and requires a steady touch. Sinam will, in 2 years, be recommended for a position as a junior scribe at a regional temple to the south. He will accept that position. He will live to be 71 years old, an old man by the standards of any time. His tomb will be discovered by archaeologists in the year 1886, in a small side valley near a place called Deir el-Medina. His coffin will be one of the most beautifully preserved examples of New Kingdom funerary art ever found, painted with scenes from the Book of the Dead, covered with prayers for his safe passage into the afterlife. His face, painted on the coffin lid in the standard style with wide, calm eyes and a gentle smile, will be photographed thousands of times by visitors to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. But right now, he is simply 10 years old, slouching at his writing desk, complaining in a small whiny voice that his hand hurts. You hide a smile behind your hand and tell him to write the line 5 more times. He groans, but he picks up his brush and continues. Evening comes gently to the temple complex. The sun sinks low in the west, painting the sky in shades of orange and rose and soft purple. The stone columns of the hypostyle hall glow as if lit from within, the red paint catching the last light, the gold leaf blazing like small fires. You return to the priest's barracks, where you eat dinner with your colleagues. The meal is simple but satisfying, the kind of food that fills the belly without weighing it down. There is fresh bread from the temple bakery, still warm from the afternoon baking. There is beer from the temple brewery, dark and rich and slightly sweet, with a foam that leaves a white mustache on your upper lip. There is a thick stew made of mutton and lentils, cooked slowly in a clay pot over a low fire, the meat so tender it falls apart on your spoon. There is a small piece of honey cake for sweetness, crumbly and golden, drizzled with honey from the temple's own beehives. The conversation is what conversation has always been among colleagues at the end of a long workday. You discuss the temple finances, whether the grain shipments from the Delta will arrive on time this year. You talk about the recent flood, how high the water rose, which fields were covered and which were not. You gossip about a senior priest who has been seen drinking too much wine at night, stumbling through the courtyard, laughing too loudly. You complain about the new scribe from Memphis, a young man who nobody likes because he talks too much about his own accomplishments and never asks about anyone else's. Someone tells a joke, something about a donkey and a tax collector, and everyone laughs. Someone else complains about the quality of the beer this month, saying it is too watery, that the brewer must have been distracted. You find a spot on a low wooden bench and let your shoulders relax for the first time all day. The tension that had been holding you upright since before dawn slowly drains away. You lean back against the wall and listen to the voices of your friends, your colleagues, your brothers in service. Later, as the stars begin to appear one by one in the darkening sky, you lie down on your low wooden bed. A thin mattress of folded linen cushions your body, soft and cool against your skin. Through a small opening in the wall, you can see a slice of the night sky, the same stars that were painted on the ceiling of the hypostyle hall, the same stars that have guided Egyptian farmers and sailors and travelers for thousands of years. The stars are beautiful, cold and bright and distant, scattered across the blackness like seeds thrown on dark soil. You think about tomorrow. Tomorrow, before the sun rises, you will dress the god again. You will walk through the dark temple, past the towering columns, through the narrow corridors, to the small stone room. You will sing to him, undress the statue, bathe him, anoint him, dress him, feed him. You will sweep the floor and lock the door. Tomorrow, your son will sit again at his writing desk, struggling with his hieroglyphs, complaining about his sore hand. Tomorrow, the temple will buzz with the business of grain and beer and offerings and prayers. Tomorrow, the Nile will keep flowing, the fields will stay green, and the universe will, you trust with all your heart, continue to exist. It continues in part because of what you did this morning in that small, dark room with that small golden statue. You close your eyes. Your breathing slows. The sounds of the temple fade into the background. The distant call of a night bird. The soft rustle of palm fronds in the breeze. The gentle murmur of the priests in the next room, settling down to sleep. The low wooden bed holds you like a hand. The darkness wraps around you like a blanket. You sleep, and that was the third day of 7 in ancient Egypt. You were a priest, a pure one, a man who performed a ritual that holds up the sky. You shaved your entire body every morning and sang to a statue that fit in your hands. You lived in a world of literacy and administration, a priesthood so vast and so wealthy that it owned 15% of the entire country. You were a father and a teacher, and a scribe and a servant of the God. But tomorrow, on the 4th day, you will not be a priest. Tomorrow, you will wake up in a small house near the docks of Thebes. The sound of water lapping against wooden boats. The smell of fish and spices and river mud. You will be 5 months pregnant. Your belly rounded, a new life growing inside you. You will keep your husband's books, settle his debts, run his business. Because in Egypt, women have rights that will not be seen again for thousands of years. You will walk into a marketplace where there is no money, only barter, only memory, only the ancient system of value that has run this great civilization for 2,000 years. You will be a trader's wife, and you will have more legal rights than your own descendants will have for another 3,000 years. Day 4 is waiting for you, a gentle journey into another life, another way of being human. You can find it in the description below, or as the next video on this channel. Thank you for listening to Ancient Tales for Sleep, now a part of your bedtime journey. If you enjoyed this 3rd day, if the story helped you find a moment of peace in your busy life, please consider subscribing so you do not miss the remaining days. Drop a comment below if you like, telling us what surprised you most about the Egyptian priesthood, or simply telling us that you are here, that you are listening, that you are finding your way toward rest. As always, dear friends, we will see you in the past, in the quiet hours before dawn, in the small rooms where the world is held together by careful hands. Until then, let your breathing be slow, let your body be heavy, let your mind be still. We're already working on the next part, and we'll upload it soon. Good night and sweet dreams.